Good morning, Boker Tov, Yoרי Geld, Guten Morgen, Buongiorno, all the languages. Last night was a very special evening for all of us. To me, it did not seem like a World Jewish Congress event. It was more like a wedding or a bar mitzvah. And I'm trying to figure out who was the bar mitzvah child. But the fact is that I felt throughout the room a great deal of warmth and friendship. I think all of us were happy they were there. I think the speech by Shimon Peres was truly extraordinary. And I think that he represents a part of Israel that unfortunately is slowly disappearing. But he was there, and he gave us, I think, a great deal to think about. I can never think of agriculture again the same way, much less water. I think also we've had a chance to meet not only Nochi Dankner, but I think the ex-president of Peru, Mr. Toledo, gave an extraordinary speech. I think it was all because of his Jewish mother-in-law. It is a great indication of your interest that we have almost a full attendance. And over the years, I've noticed that it's rare that we have so close to a full attendance. I believe it's because all of you realize the importance of the events taking place, not only in September, but what has taken place during the last 6 months. When we met last year, nobody could have believed what would have happened to the Arab world in the so-called Arab Spring, when you had uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt and Bahrain and Yemen and in Syria, Morocco, all throughout the Arab world. And what we've seen is a change. Now, many of us say, I wonder if this change is for the better. A lot of us say, maybe this is nothing more than a Muslim Brotherhood takeover. But what we've seen in the streets so far is young people demonstrating for jobs, for equality, for life. Many of the things that the young people in Israel in the 30s and 40s during the British rule yearned for. They did not have the same rights that the Arabs had about demonstrating in the street, but the goals were the same. We will see what was happening. At the same time, we're watching slowly but surely as Iran proceeds to have nuclear weapons. And as some of us are speaking last night, whatever the vote is in the UN, it is not half as dangerous as the Arabs having nuclear weapons. Moshe Kantor and I spoke last night about the danger. The danger necessarily is not about Iran having nuclear weapons. The danger is, frankly, about part of these nuclear weapons going into the hands of terrorists and what that means for all of us. One dirty bomb in one city can destroy a whole population. Not by its what happens, but by the fear it causes. We've also watched Hezbollah as they started from 25% in Lebanon to 30%, and through intimidation and killing and a great many other undemocratic means, they have slowly but surely taken over the government of Lebanon. They may have done it with Syrian help. They may have done it with Iranian help. But what was evident is that nobody came to the help of the Lebanese democratic process. Nobody came to the help when you had a Egyptian Spring and you had the Mubarak and his family thrown out. This said to the Arab world, they have no one to depend on, which is a very, very desperate message. I remember myself, I happened to be leaving Prague right before the Prague Spring in 1967, 1968. I left about a month or two before the actual Prague Spring hit its best. And a month after that, Russian tanks rolled into Prague and changed it back into even more radical communism than the past. No one can predict what will happen. Will it follow the road of what happened in Iran with the Ayatollah, or will it follow the road of what happened in Israel and democracy? Time will tell. But I'll say that what I see so far does not look that promising. We also see a rise in anti-Semitism in Europe and what is happening. Various people blame the fact that you have a large Muslim population. In France, it's almost 10% of the population. England, likewise. Germany, growing. Country after country. And yet, we still feel that we have a common bond with the various European countries. And to me, that is extremely important. Now, we talk about the delegitimization, as I spoke last year, about what's happening to Israel. That delegitimization is being focused now into one thing, and that's the UN vote. There's two ways to look at the UN vote. Either it will be a tragedy for Israel if it takes place, or it will have no consequence. I think the answer is neither. It will have consequences, but not as consequential as many of us fear. Because the only way you can have real peace is through negotiation. Interesting enough, most of the European countries signed on to that agreement, an agreement that says there can be no peace in the Middle East without negotiations. You can't just vote it in the General Assembly. I sat in the Congress and I watched when Bibi Netanyahu spoke to the U.S. Congress. And I got up and down 53 times applauding. At the end of the time, I think I had a pain in my back of my legs from getting up and down. But the fact is that it wasn't only me, it was the entire U.S. Congress. And it was one of the most proudest days I found for Israel in the United States, because the Congress and the people were one, and they understood what the Prime Minister said, and we all could be very proud. There were those people who say, well, maybe he was too hard on President Obama, and maybe he did not win the popularity contest with the Democratic Party and what was happening. But unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, this is not a popularity contest. I think the American people, particularly the Jews, well, at least the American people, I can never talk on the American Jews, realized that there was something dangerous coming up, and that perhaps President Obama reached out too far in his desire to move along the peace process. All these considered, I must say that, and looking around, I think there's no organization better filled to do this job of reaching out to people all over the world than the World Jewish Congress. I don't think I could have invented a better organization. And I must tell you, wherever I travel and the people I meet from the World Jewish Congress, you are all spectacular, first class, understanding it. And I've never been involved in an organization with so many talented people, all who are working together. For a Jewish organization, that's unique. I think the best way we can all work together is be apart. But the fact is that we are there, we're working together. There are so many other pieces of the pie, but the most important part we have is that Israel desperately needs the World Jewish Congress to help it, because there is no other organization that will help it the way we can. We in New York and Jerusalem need your advice, information on what's happening, who to speak to about the various issues. But there are two other issues that I think is extremely important. Several years ago, when I started as president, one of the first things we put into our bylaws is that a certain amount of the organization will be people under 40. Youth keeps on changing as I get older, but the fact is that we need the World Jewish Congress, Diplomatic Corps. We need young people. We are not recruiting enough young people yet. We are not reaching out in the right way. I can't tell you how to do it. Each country has its own way of doing it. Each country has its own organization. But we must get it out. Now, one of the best ways we can recruit young people is to give them a cause. We have enough causes now, particularly with the UN, particularly what's happening on campuses. Very much the campuses are being taken over by Muslim groups. We must do everything we can to reach out to these young people. We must be going to campuses and speaking out. We must have youth organizations. And the basis of all that is the thing that I believe in most, and that's education. Not necessarily religious education, but education in general, to understand culturally what it is to be Jewish, what it means. We must reach out. I myself, I think many of you know, have 12 major schools, about 20 smaller schools in Eastern Europe. We educate about 10,000 children. And frankly, these are the children, in many cases in Eastern Europe, when they graduate and they get out, first thing they do is join Jewish organizations, not necessarily the World Jewish Congress, but different Jewish organizations. The key is education. Education is the future of our people. And unfortunately, most of us are not spending enough time, enough money working with the organizations that educate our children. We worry about our own children and how they're educated, but sometimes we have to worry about those children who don't have the money, don't have the ability, and what they can do. Because, again, as I say, they're our future. I've said in the past that anti-Semitism is learned at the dinner table, and that a mother and father are talking what they saw on television, and the children hear it, and they mimic their parents. And so begins another time. The more we can see, the more we can talk about education, children, and learning the truth, the more we can be together. We're one people, we're one family, and let's do everything we can to make things happen. We spoke also with several countries about giving some money to help you on doing media, propaganda, whatever you want to call it. That is something that we're working on, and that should be a way to change things. Right now, the Arabs or the Muslims are spending $500 million on information, organization. Israel is spending $1.2 million. So it's a slight difference. I forget who was speaker, I think it was Toledo, who said last night, maybe if Israel had one less plane and used that for Hezbollah, what a change that would make. I can see in the stations that I have in Eastern Europe, whereby these stations report positive things about Israel, that the amount of anti-Semitism is much less. And that is something that we can see. We can see it over and over again. Again, we need your help, place by place, country by country. You represent 45 countries here, which is about 98% of the Jewish world. And I'm extraordinarily proud to be your president. I'm extraordinarily proud of each and every one of you and what you're doing. And I think many ways it's very apropos that we're meeting here in Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people, at a time that Israel needs us desperately. They need our ability, they need our help, and we're going to be there for them. Thank you very much, and again, thank you from my bottom of my heart. God bless you.